Welcome to episode 71 of Mitolife Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn, and today we have Morley Robbins, the legend, back on the podcast for the fifth time. Morley Robbins is a widely requested, repeated guest on the show. Everyone loves our conversations and all of the topics that we discuss, which I believe go against not only the mainstream, but the mainstream alternative narrative out there. So with this virus that's less than 0.5% fatal going around, there's a lot of hysteria, a lot of misinformation, disinformation, marketing, and we talk about that in this episode. People recommending hormone D supplementation, aka vitamin D, high dose ascorbic acid, zinc, picolinate, and other synthetic forms of zinc which deplete copper. And everyone's not looking at bioavailable copper, which is really what runs the immune system, which Morley will get into this interview. So I love how meticulous he is with his research, how he connects the dots, and perhaps most importantly, how he articulates it in easy to understand ways. So the analogies that he uses and the way that he describes the mechanisms of the mitochondria are just genius in my opinion. So for those of you that don't know Morley Robbins, he's a mineral expert, and I believe the best experts are self-taught. So he is self-taught in magnesium, iron, and copper. He says those are the only three minerals that really matter. The other ones are important, but we must focus on the three minerals that really matter, which are iron, copper, and magnesium. So here is Mr. Morley Robbins. Enjoy. All right, we're here with Morley Robbins for the fifth time, I believe. Welcome back to the show, Morley.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming back on. And you sent me a message that you've been having some revelations about COVID-19 and the Corona, the SARS-2 virus, there's all these names for it, and its relation to minerals, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, everyone's been going through their own stress about this whole thing. It's been very disruptive, obviously, around the world. But it's all about me, right? You know, they took my research facility away. I do a lot of research in Starbucks, and so I had to reinvent my routine. But I've adjusted. I'm still drinking coffee, more of it at home than on the road. But it's kind of hard to do research when you're in a drive-through situation. But in any event, I don't know that we need to get too deep into the COVID-19. But I think what's important for people to realize is that what that whole crisis did was inspire me to study two issues. One is the immune system. What is it? What is it really? And how does it really run? And this whole idea of, well, 80% of your immune system is your gut. It's like, that's grade school mentality. And the other is to study malaria. Why would I be studying malaria? As soon as they started talking about hydroxychloroquine, I knew that was quinine. And I knew that was used in malaria treatment. And it is a very, very important drug in malaria, as you probably know. But what that told me was that there's a parasite dimension to COVID-19. This was never viruses are a reaction. They are not the the instigator. So the viral response is really significant. But I think we're still wrestling with what is the pathogen that's causing the problem. We know that it's attacking lung tissue. We know that there's it's like people are coming down with COPD, very severe lung issues. Well, anytime we're talking about the lung, any kind of lung disorder, it's a lack of copper, lack of bioavailable copper. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about asthma or bronchitis or COPD or lung cancer. Doesn't matter. It's a copper issue that tissue is not able to make energy because it can't activate oxygen to respond to the crisis. And of course, there's all sorts of theories that are being bantered about. I think Zach Bush has some very interesting ideas about air pollution and the glyphosate. Tom Cowan with the 5G dimension. There's another whole theory about people who got flu vaccines previously are the most vulnerable. Then, of course, we have the whole dynamic of, so what do people over 80, people over 50 with one chronic condition, people over 30 with 2 chronic conditions, and people with any lung disease have in common? They're really compromised. Their ability to make energy is very compromised, and therefore they are immunocompromised. Now, here's a fun question, because I'm sure you have monitored this enough to know what's going on. How much time did Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and all those people spend talking about the immunocompetence of Earthlings? Did you even hear them use that word?
No.
No. Why would they not use that word, Matt?
They don't want people to know that they're in control of their health.
Exactly. Right. Because what they want to do is terrify everybody that we can't respond to this, right? Mm-hmm. That's really what this is about, is we, I think, what was the meme I saw? The people that are promoting the problem and the pill are the same people. So they're hyping up, oh, we have a crisis, right? Problem, reaction, solution. Oh yeah, we've got the answer for you. And it's absolutely amazing that no one called them on it. All the optics were, well, I shouldn't say all, but certainly 99.9% of the optics were on the pathogen, the particle, as Pasteur used to call it. And no one's talking about the field with Béchamp, right? That what are they talking about? And what I began to realize as I was studying the immune system and studying the mitochondria that run the immune system is that what Béchamp was talking about 150 years ago, he wasn't just talking about the field, he was talking about the bioenergetic field, the ability of the individual to produce energy. Because it's when you have a strong bioenergetic field, you have a filter that keeps the pathogens at bay. Or it's not that it doesn't let them in, it's like they're going to come in, but you're not going to be compromised for it. And I think that's a real striking realization that so many people that succumb to this condition, whatever it is, I don't think, they're still arguing about the bubonic plague, about what it was. They're still arguing about the Spanish flu. Do you think we're going to know what this was next week? No. We're going to still be arguing about this, not in our lifetime, but maybe in our children's or our grandchildren's lifetime. So there's not going to be a quick resolution to what is this thing. But what we can do is reveal that the people who are most compromised by it are the most immunodeficient. They don't have an immune system that can respond to it. So I think that was one of the most important things that kind of stood out for me, was that this complete and utter silence about the immune system, that we do have control over that we can influence it by our diet and our lifestyle and the nutrients that we tend to focus on and our ability to manage stress and so on and so forth. But that's not a part of the narrative. It just was not at all included in the daily briefings that took place in the White House.
Yeah, that's well said. And I talk a lot, as you know, about calcification, lipofuscin, and fibrosis. And there's like accumulations, I think, that cause an inability to make energy. And then there's simple nutrient deficiencies. And most people, myself included, everyone has both. Right? Yeah, like some nutritional deficiencies, and you have excess calcium because you're magnesium deficient. Everything kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And the key is, as you're talking about calcification, or you're talking about lipofuscin, well, we got to back up a step or two, because, and I'm pretty well versed in calcium, as you know, because I'm pretty well versed in magnesium, and it took me the longest time to realize why the magnesium kept leaving the body. When we don't have enough copper, bioavailable copper in the body, the copper's down here, iron's going to build, right? It's going to start to accumulate in the tissue. And I've always referenced Hart, Steenbach, Waddell, and LVM from 1928. Well, came across a really fascinating study by Bruce Ames and some of his colleagues, and they referenced some people that I'd never even heard of back in 2003 that further documented this copper-iron crisis. If copper's low, iron's going to build. Why is that significant? As soon as iron is building, there's more oxidative stress, right? And what does oxidative stress do? It creates free radicals that burn up the magnesium that then allow the calcification. That also cause the lipofuscin to build, because what is lipofuscin? It's a glycated fatty mess inside the lysosomes. What are they doing? They're trying to break down ferritin. What's inside ferritin? Tons and tons of iron. And if they can't recycle it properly, then you're going to continue to build this mess inside your cells. And how is it going to show on your body? As brown spots, not freckles, big, smaller than a penny-sized brown spots all over the body. Especially, it'll start with the legs, and then it'll go to the arms. But I just came across a fascinating study. I don't know what you probably spend time on ResearchGate, and they've got some really good articles there. And not all of them are immediately accessible, so you have to ask permission to get it. And one of the authors sent me an article about the mitochondrial calcium uniporter, MCU. And it's a very important channel that's used. You would think it's to manage calcium, right? MCU, mitochondrial calcium uniporter, right? No, it's where iron comes into the mitochondria. It is known that that's how mitochondria get overwhelmed with iron, is when the MCU starts to open up. Why? Because there's a buildup of iron in the cell. Where is this iron coming from? People have faulty diets. People have a faulty lifestyle. And so, and that's also true of the L-type and T-type calcium channels. You've heard of calcium channel blockers, right? You think it's to keep the calcium at bay, right? No, it's to stop the iron. So it's like all these sleights of hand in the world of nutrition and medicine. So we just have to be really careful about who is the bad guy. And I guess maybe I'm just trying to simplify it. I really think there's only one bad guy, and that's this iron guy. And if there are a couple good guys, obviously copper and magnesium. But the other bad guy, fascinating, it's actually oxygen. Oxygen is a poison. Next to fluoride, it's the most reactive element on the planet. It's a free radical. Did you know that? Oxygen is a free radical. And I don't think a lot of people know that. Certainly a lot of doctors don't know that. And so that's why oxygen and iron are so volatile with each other, because they have this immediate need for each other's electrons. It's really kind of like, wow, there's a wow to it. And then you think about all this blood that we have in our body carrying all this oxygen. It's like, wait a minute, who designed that? That was like, what were they thinking? But in any event, I think people need to understand that oxygen, again, the phrase that I use is, we can't live without it, but we can't age without oxidants. And then we're back to this lipofuscin thing and the calcification and what have you. And again, it's just, there's a lot of belief that the buildup of calcium is what's causing the oxidative stress. Calcium buildup is a reaction to the oxidative stress. Calcium buildup is trying to numb the tissue to the assault. And I think it's important that people understand that. So again, we've got these different classes of people that responded to COVID-19 that really gave us a window into where are we vulnerable as a species, and what do we need to do in order to strengthen our immune system, because that's really what it comes down to. And so I wanted to at least set the stage with that, and then give the listeners a chance to catch their breath. But you might have a question or two before I start to do the dive into the mitochondria and how it affects the immune system.
Yeah. Well, a good segue, you mentioned breath. The whole mask thing, I haven't worn a mask during this whole thing, but I'm in Idaho, so it's a little out there. But I've seen some funny memes about CO2 toxicity. Like, I'll see a lot of conspiracy type folk make health memes, and I just like face palm, because I'm like, stay in your lane, just stick with conspiracies, because health and they're different. They're different areas of study that, but I saw one on CO2 toxicity, on how wearing a mask causes carbon dioxide. But I think it's a good thing, because from my research, studying Dr. Raymond Peet, and carbon dioxide is actually good for us, right? Contrary to what they say, everyone's about oxygen and ozone and oxygen and slamming it. But CO2 is kind of like the gatekeeper, right? That lets oxygen in. So wearing a mask could have a benefit, kind of similar to bag breathing for some people.
I think bag breathing has a specific benefit under certain conditions. I think there's a reason why we're not plants. There's a reason why we breathe oxygen and they breathe CO2. I don't know. I know there's a much higher concentration of carbon dioxide to oxygen. That's a really good point. I don't know that I don't know that I would go so far as to say there's benefit to it, but I think that I've read some of those same articles about how the mask may in fact be contributing to a buildup of COVID. The COVID-19 is on the outside of the mask, and the other problem is it's going right through the holes. The cloth, even the N95 are not stopping. Whatever this pathogen is, it's not stopping it. That gives people a false sense of protection, but I don't think it's really doing what people think it's doing. I think there's a lot of mythology around that. And so at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is people need to understand how their immune system really works. Now, what really changed it for me, my understanding, when V.A. Shiva, Ayudurai, are you familiar with him? Mm-hmm. I don't have a straight read on him, but he has some very interesting information. And I began to wobble a little bit when I found out he had, an ownership position in a drug company that made vaccines. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? But he has a video from January 2nd of this year on the immune system. Really excellent. And working with a whiteboard, and he really lays out the various components, the innate immune system, the adaptive, the the whole concept of the interferon system, and then you've got the brain and the gut. It's a really nice model that he presents. And he even goes as far as to say who's making all this interferon, and does a very nice job of that. But that really got me thinking about, well, what are the cells behind all of this immune system? And, the usual cast of character, there's B cells and C cells, there's macrophages, there's a whole bunch of different components that we can talk about. But what really came to light was the importance of the T cells, especially in a viral attack. They're very, very important. And T cells can go 5 different ways. We've got Th1 cells, got Th2 cells, we've got Th17 cells that act like macrophages, right? Then we have memory T cells, and then we have regulatory T cells. So we got 5 different dimensions. So guess what the T cells run on? Energy.
Copper.
Yeah, and mitochondria. And guess what's fueling the mitochondria? It's copper. It's absolutely copper. Again, I think we may have talked about the research by Paul Cobain. At the time, he was at the University of Saskatchewan, 2004, 2006, where he discovered that there's 50,000 atoms of copper in each mitochondria of a yeast cell. Okay, that's notable. Now, I don't know how many mitochondria are in T cells, but I do have some numbers that you'll find fascinating. There's no mitochondria in red blood cells. It's anaerobic, right? Average cell in the human body has 100 mitochondria. Average liver cell, 1 to 2,000 mitochondria. Average heart cell, 5,000 mitochondria. Average mature egg cell, 600,000 mitochondria. You know how many are in sperm?
A lot.
5. No, 5. There's not that many.
Wow.
Yeah. No, that we're outclassed by the ladies. And then you've heard of Parkinson's disease, right?
Mm-hmm.
It involves tissue called the substantia nigra, pars compacta. Sometimes they put that PC on the end of it. So there's about 900,000 cells in the substantia nigra. How many mitochondria in each cell? 2 million.
Wow.
2 million mitochondria.
Wow.
And what is the official classification of Parkinson's disease? When 2/3 of those cells are no longer living. Why do cells die? Because they can't make energy. So I don't know the number. I looked. Trust me, I spent a couple days looking for the number of mitochondria in T cells, and there was absolute silence. And if somebody knows, I'd love to find out. Would really appreciate having that number. But what's important for people to appreciate is if you've got a cell that's got to be scanning the body, that's got to be recognizing what is this creature, whatever it is, and then I've got to decide which way am I going to go, how am I going to respond, how am I going to mobilize. Well, that doesn't just take energy, that takes intelligence. And intelligence does take energy. If with higher IQ, again, think about it. 2% of our body weight is brain tissue. What percent of the oxygen are we consuming with our brain? 20%.
46.
20%. 20%.
Oh, wow.
So tenfold difference.
Wow.
So the need to churn over and create energy, and my most favorite definition of stress is by Mark Hyman. Stress is the body's inability to make energy for the mind to respond to its environment. And those people that are being hammered by COVID-19 couldn't make energy. They couldn't respond. They couldn't mobilize their T cells to create the assault. So what's the difference between the Th1, Th2? Well, Th2 is they're trying to make antibodies. It's really important. It's a very, very, very critical function. Again, that takes thought. That takes energy. And this idea that our immune system is just kind of like coming from the ethos. No, it's not. We've got to have the ability to create the energy, and that requires nutrients. And it isn't just copper, but good heavens, there's a term called the matrix copper pool. Have you ever heard of it? That's that 50,000 atoms of copper in the matrix, right? And so if you don't know about the matrix copper pool, then you don't understand what mitochondria are all about. Because what is the rate limiting variable in mitochondria? It's complex 4, right? That's where oxygen gets activated. And with the simultaneous, it's absolutely amazing. What does that complex do? The first thing it does is it splits oxygen apart. Think about that. Think of the energy that takes. Okay, we're going to take this O2 and split it apart. Then we're going to bring 4 electrons into the complex, and we're going to pump 4 hydrogens out, right? And then we're going to release. We're going to make 2 molecules of water from that 1 molecule of oxygen, and then we're going to release 3 ADP. Think about the thought behind all that. That's one complex inside the electron transport chain. Then that's complex 4. Now let's talk about complex 5. Do you know much about complex 5 with the alpha and beta subunits, which is the actual? It doesn't actually rotate. It's the F naught that rotates. That's the part that's spinning at 9,000 revolutions per minute, right? So it's humming along. Our car's red line at 6,000. But the alpha and beta subunits get bumped. Each time the cycle goes around, it's getting bumped. And guess where the ADP becomes ATP? It's on the beta subunit. Beta subunit. Guess what you got to have present in order for that to take place? Got to have copper. No copper, no can do. And so I came across a really impressive article by Wesselink, Wesselink, and I'll send you a link to it. And it's all about these nutrients that we need in order to have healthy mitochondria. Guess what the one mineral that was missing in that article? I mean, we're talking about a robust article. Guess who they forgot to talk about?
Copper.
Ding, ding, ding.
I actually have that one pulled up here, and they actually mentioned coffee or caffeine, coenzyme 10, alpha tocopherol, carnosine.
Look at
all
the
this
figure.
Stuff.
Matt, look at the figure on that. There's a very bright green figure. It might be towards the end of the article. Look at all of the things they're talking about in there, and they missed copper. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. And so that begins to underscore the mineral bias that exists in conventional thought. Is we can't talk about copper, we can't talk about iron. Oh my gosh, because then that would make people aware of the fact that that's what's compromising their immune system. And we certainly can't talk about copper, because then, oh my gosh, they'd become independent. They would have health freedom, and then they would be medically independent. We can't have that, right? And so it's just, it's insane, absolutely insane. So I think that people just need to realize that it isn't that complicated. And all of this foment about the pathogen, I think, is misdirected energy. Because, again, the importance of quinine, what does quinine do? Well, it's a metal chelator. So it chelates iron. It also chelates zinc. Oh, it also chelates copper. So you got to be careful with it. But in an acute condition, I think it certainly might be worth doing. But that's only because you're compromised. If you're not properly eating, if your lifestyle is insane, well then you're going to be much more compromised. And I think people just need to know that there are trade-offs, and this idea that, well, what's the famous saying? I want to eat my Big Mac and take a statin too. That way I don't have to change my lifestyle. Well, I think what we've learned is that lifestyle does matter, and this idea of, so why am I losing my freedom because you're unable to take care of your lifestyle? I mean, we could have an entire conversation about that. So I think that this has really forced a lot of different issues that may have been playing in the background to the foreground, because it's really requiring people to be much more cognizant of what's going on, not just in their community, but in their body. Those are just some random thoughts.
Well said. Yeah, that was all awesome. And I think supplement sales, like my brand Mitolife's doing pretty well, and I think people are becoming more aware. And as that's happening, I'm trying to be more vocal to educate people on, getting off their multi-mineral supplement and supplementing with the right things, not supplementing iron and ascorbic acid and all these things that people are taking in large amounts.
Yeah, and again, that kind of touches on this is just my pet peeve. And again, I know I'm a bit of a heretic, pretty eccentric guy. But again, my focus is very singular, as you've come to learn. I really worship at the altar of bioavailable copper because of what it does inside the body. And it really upsets me. It's alarming to me that every recommendation coming out of either allopathic land or alternative land on how to treat this COVID creature, whatever it is, let's go down the alternative route. High dose ascorbic acid, high dose zinc, high dose vitamin D. What are all those doing? Killing bioavailable copper, right? I mean, it's the research, and people said, well, Morley, under extreme conditions. I'm like, how did you get into this crisis? That's what I want to know. But so then we've got this, that's the alternative side. Let's talk about the allopathic conventional side. Oh yeah, let's use hydroxychloroquine. Well, I know what it does. It's very, very effective, but you pay a price. And oh yeah, let's add azithromycin to it. You know what that does? The loss of antioxidant enzymes by taking an antibiotic like Z-Pak? Are people insane? And again, they don't know. And so then we've wiped out a major aspect of our immune system. And again, we're trying to solve the crisis. I'm like, again, how'd you get into that crisis? And then, let's talk about the vaccines. OMG. We're not going to go there for political reasons, but it's just like, that doesn't strengthen the immune system. People don't realize what that does to their overall well-being. But there's a really key part of ceruloplasmin that if it gets exposed to a lot of sialic acid, it doesn't work right. Well, guess what's in vaccines? There's a lot of sialic acid. Wow, what a coincidence. So it's, again, we could talk about all the tissue that's in there and all the formaldehyde and things like that. It's like we can get lost in that. I think people that are following you, I would assume, know better. But it's just like that is not the answer. The answer is, I think we need some accountability. How did the WHO get in charge of this? That's what I want to know. When did Bill Gates get elected as the global emperor for planet Earth? I missed that election. I don't know how that happened. And we could, digress. But the thing is, I think people need to realize that not all is as it seems. And so all these recommendations that people are being directed to may have second and third order effects that they didn't realize. Mm-hmm. And I think people that are out of a defensive posture, taking lots of zinc and lots of vitamin D, well, they don't understand copper and they don't understand retinol. They absolutely don't understand the supreme power of retinol to guide the immune system. Because vitamin D suppresses the nuclear factor kappa B. It's a very important pathway, as you know, for inflammation. So suppressing is different than down-regulating, and that's what vitamin A does. So what's the difference between suppressing and down-regulating? Well, suppressing is spanking a child and putting them in their room and locking the door. That's suppression. What is down-regulation? It's putting your forehead on their forehead and say, let's calm down. It's going to be okay. Let's change our behavior. And kids respond to that. That's down-regulating when you have this mono-a-mono connection. And that's what vitamin A does. It completely changes the function of these pathways. So I think people need to be more aware of the options and the alternatives. And that's why I appreciate the chance to share these ideas with your community, because it's just, there can't be enough people to know about this, to be honest.
I agree. And that actually is a good segue. A friend asked this question in the Q&A. Is retinol needed to load copper into ceruloplasmin? I think we've talked about that in previous episodes.
It really is. It was Cousins and Barber in 1987 made that discovery, that it's a 13-cis retinoic acid that actually loads the copper into the ceruloplasmin protein. And not to get too geeky on you, but inside the cell you have what's called the Golgi apparatus. And it would be more accurate to call it the coppery apparatus instead of the Golgi apparatus. But in any event, the proteins that are in there are ATP7A and ATP7B. 7A, people may know as the Menkes gene. 7B as the Wilson's gene. And those proteins are instrumental in loading copper into 7 different key regulatory proteins that are all copper dependent that run the body. So things like tyrosinase and dopamine beta monooxygenase and the PAM enzyme that is ridiculously important for all biogenic amines. There are about 65 biogenic amines in the human body. Like you've heard of adrenaline, noradrenaline, dopamine, serotonin, melatonin, things like that. Well, they don't work unless that PAM enzyme kisses them in a very special way. You have antioxidant enzymes. You have SOD3, that's the extracellular superoxide dismutase. So there are 7 different proteins like that need to be properly loaded. But ceruloplasmin is the granddaddy of them all. And yes, it does require retinol, which means that retinol would be involved in the Golgi apparatus. You don't see that in a lot of articles. Again, there are certain authors that'll get into that level of detail, but not all will do that, unfortunately.
Interesting.
So that's why retinol and copper. So they're really joined at the hip. They have a very powerful interrelationship.
I just think back to my vegan days when I was thinking that all the carrot juice, I was drinking gallons and gallons of carrot juice, that I was getting my vitamin A, but I didn't know that was the precursor. And I look at all these documentaries on Netflix now, and I think it's part of an agenda to push people away from supporting small homesteads like I have here, or small family farms that are producing real food for people, and good butter and pastured eggs and raw milk and raw cheese, where all these things. I mean, you inspired me to get goats because you said milk has macrophages, right?
Well, here's a study you want to look up. This is gonna blow your mind. Hibbard, Hibbard, 2017, and it's the micronutrient deficiencies, and you want to be looking for, what figure is it? Let me see. I'm going to forward this to you. And what it's looking at is the micronutrients to run our gut.
Hmm.
And what I think is going to blow your mind is when you see the figure. Your listeners are like, "Who is this guy? What's he talking about?" But this is what you. Let me see if you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking for that figure, and what you see at the bottom here, what they're measuring is the bacteroid vulgaris population. Whoopsie. Come on.
Okay, I'm pulling it up. Yeah, Science
Okay.
Mag.
It's a line graph that has 5 going up to a peak and then coming down, and then there's retinol at the bottom.
I see it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll
Right.
put that link below. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is that? What is that graph talking about? It's measuring a very volatile pathogen that's in our gut. And what it's revealing, look at the difference in the chart between beta carotene and retinol. Retinol is a flat line.
Mm-hmm.
That pathogen does not exist in a retinol body.
Wow.
Look at the beta carotene. Takes off just like it did with retinol, just like it did with retinol palmitate. That's one of the most important slides I've ever come across, is that it really reveals the power of retinol. And again, it's an energetic thing. This isn't just, well, it looks different than it's the energy behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people need to understand, is that I'm inspired that you got goats because of our conversation. That's very cool. And it's really important that people realize what the value is of these animals and why they're so important for producing the nutrients that we need in order to run our body.
Yeah, and goat's milk is also a great source of selenium and vitamin E, which are often missing, those two nutrients. And so many
Absolutely.
things, and I'd imagine there's copper in there as well.
Well, there absolutely is copper. I mean, sheep and goats have a preferential uptake of copper, or I should say that they are particularly sensitive if there's a deficiency. So you must be constantly aware of their need for copper. Very, very important. So if they have any kind of problems mating and having offspring, they don't have enough copper. If they start having gait problems, they don't have enough copper. If they lose their zeal, they're just not able to metabolize because of missing copper.
Interesting. I'll have to throw some bee pollen in their feed.
Absolutely. Well, I would be talking to a vet about how do you make sure that goats get enough copper. That's what I would be doing. Again, that's a side of the world that I don't know at all in terms of what do we need to do to the soil? What do we need to do for the animals and the plants? It's a big enough challenge trying to figure out the humans, but I commend you for your commitment to raise real food. I think that's very impressive.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm trying to get Jeff Lawton on the podcast, and he has a great YouTube lecture on NPK fertilizer and that whole history of NPK fertilizer and how we had to stack pesticides and herbicides and insecticides and fungicides on top of the NPK because everything kept dying, and like the whole domino effect that fertilizer has on the soil. It's spelled GEOF, like GEOFF, but yeah, he's like the world's expert to me on NPK fertilizer, which I think needs to be talked about more because that just decimates the mineral balance of the soil.
Well, you may know the other name. When I think of NPK, I'm thinking of the book is Soil Grass Cancer. I'm embarrassed I can't think of the author's name. He's a French author, but in the book he talks about NPK.
Mm-hmm. Is it Andre Voisin?
Voisin, thank you, Andre Voisin. Okay. And he was a world-renowned biochemist that loved to farm dairy. That was just his passion. That was his hobby. And he lamented the fact that there wasn't enough copper in the soil, which meant it wasn't getting into the cows, which meant it wasn't getting into the milk, which meant it wasn't getting into his customers, and they were getting cancer. And he has some meticulous diagrams in that book But one of the points that I do recall vividly is that NPK blocks the absorption of copper.
Wow.
Wow is right. And how long has NPK been used? Since the First World War, right? Wasn't it used as it was a military armament that they decided to turn into a fertilizer? Wink, wink.
Mid 1800s. Yeah. Yeah.
Was it that far back?
It was that far. Yeah, I think that's part of why I like your simplistic, like hyper focused approach. And there's so many things we could talk about, like you mentioned Zach Bush and glyphosate and 5G and heavy metals and car exhaust and adjuvants in the vaccines. There's all these contributing factors, but in the end, to simplify it, it always comes down to copper deficiency, right, and magnesium deficiency.
Well, and the thing is, the reason why I focus on that is what it really comes down to is an inability to manage oxygen. That's been the fight on this planet since the beginning. There's a very cute cartoon, and it's the first creature to come out of the sea, and it's thinking to itself, eat, survive, eat, reproduce, and survive. Eat, reproduce, and survive. And then it evolved into another creature. And what's it think about? Eat, reproduce, and survive. And it goes to, and then it gets to the monkey. Eat, reproduce, and survive. And then the person that's the farthest away from the sea, of course, is a human. And his thought bubble is, what's it all about? We got to survive on this planet. We've got to eat the right food so we can survive and we can manage this oxygen molecule. I think people don't realize that every time we take a breath, we're bringing more potential oxidants into our body. It's like we better have the wherewithal and the nutrients to slice and dice it. That's why, again, it does come back to these principal magnesium and copper, because when there's magnesium deficiency, what rises? Oxidative stress. Hydrogen peroxide takes off like a rocket. Well, that must mean that it must be managing oxygen some way. It's protecting it, right? So it's just trying to simplify it so that we can act on it and not get overwhelmed by all the variables, because it's very easy to get kind of inundated by it, as you well know.
Oh yeah, definitely. Are there any other topics you want to touch on, Morley, before we jump into the Q&A? Because you shared some great stuff already.
No, I'm good. If you want to get into the Q&A, that'd be great. That'd be fine.
Okay, awesome.
I got things off my chest. I hope they make sense to the listener.
I loved it. Yeah, it's definitely stuff for people to consider. And I actually made my background on my computer that electron transport chain with all the complexes. Just I can see that every time I look at my computer and
that's
think about
great.
Copper.
Yeah, good luck finding articles that talk about copper in the ETC.
Right. These are a lot of the questions always. People like to think what this one specific symptom is linked to. Like someone asked about dark circles under the eyes and the relation to mineral imbalance. Mineral imbalance can cause kind of every manifestation on the surface, right, that you can see. Right. But I know a lot of people will say that's liver or different things. So
usually when people do have those dark circles, they're called liver shiners. They're also they tend to show up on people who have allergies and people who have sleep issues. Again, and does it mean that there's 4 or 5 different reasons why? No, I think that when people are under stress, they're going to have a buildup of iron in their liver, which is going to affect their ability to manage the IgA response. Guess who regulates IgA? Retinol.
Oh.
Yeah. And so again, the issue is that the buildup, again, it's just the body's way of saying, hey, dude, your liver's not working right. You got too much exhaust in your liver. And that is certainly the people that I know that I work with who have allergies all have low bioavailable copper and uniformly have a buildup. As soon as there's a copper deficiency, we know that iron's building. Where does it build first? It's always in the liver. Again, it's just axiomatic. It's the way mammals are wired as a species, so that the liver shiners, and they don't. It's interesting. Not everyone who has iron issues as liver shiners, but as soon as you see it, you know there's an iron overload and it's got to be dealt with. But I think it's highly correlated with the allergy, the allergic response, and with insomnia would be the other big factor.
That's interesting. Yeah, and if this is your first time hearing Morley, I definitely recommend going back and listening to our first show, Why Minerals Run the Show, because he does a good hour and a half breakdown on iron and how everyone has so much of it. And that's kind of a whole episode that's hard to give a little soundbite on, right?
Yeah, I think for someone who's never heard that before, their head just blew off their shoulder. Like, what?
Yeah, the fortification is just one aspect. Like whenever I go on an airplane, I always reject the food because I bring my own snacks and those little crackers. Is it ferric iron in there? Like inorganic iron?
Iron fortified. You gotta have it. Can't live without it. Not to mention all the B vitamins that are fortified. Those are kind of scary too.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think of all the people traveling. It's like 9 out of 10 people are like, "Yeah, I'll take the food from the stewardess." I'm like, "What are you guys doing? That's poison they're handing out."
Yeah. Well, I think the blessing is there's not as much flying.
Yeah.
People are not moving around the country or around the world the way they used to. So there's a benefit to the restrictions.
Less iron coming in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Does high serum iron? Does high serum copper mean that it was kicked off ceruloplasmin?
Yes. Yeah. So that what we have to keep in mind is that the amount of copper in the blood is about 1%. It's a little tiny percentage, but that doesn't mean it's not important. There's an equal concentration of iron in the brain as there is in the liver. I think it's about 20 milligrams each. That's a big bolus of iron running those two key organs. But within that 1% of copper in the blood, 95% of it is supposed to be complexed in ceruloplasmin. And ceruloplasmin is found in a lot of places. It's not just in the blood. It's made by a lot of different tissue. It's called hephaestin in the gut. It's called cyclopen in the womb. It's called ceruloplasmin in the blood in many tissues. And it's also called GPI, CP, in the brain especially, and in macrophages. So it comes in variations of the same theme, but it's all designed to manage the iron state, if you will, whether it's going to be ferrous or ferric iron. But the key is that when copper starts to rise in the blood, you know that ceruloplasmin has been breached. And so what causes ceruloplasmin to get tweaked? Well, ascorbic acid, vitamin D, a lot of medications, citric acid. So a lot of people, they don't realize that these different chemicals have an effect on their ceruloplasmin status. Again, most people have never heard of ceruloplasmin. Certainly most practitioners have not heard of it. And so if they haven't heard of it, well, then it's out of their field of vision. And so one of my students' husband is a pastor, and he teaches a course in logic for his congregation. And the theme of the course is missing information equals missing truth, that's become a real rallying cry for me to really help people understand that if you didn't know about ceruloplasmin, when you do find out about it, you have a completely different definition of what truth is. Well, now I'm refining it to missing minerals equal missing metabolism. And I think you as a mitochondrial nerd, you understand what I'm talking about. And I think that's really important for people to know. And again, the mineral that no one knows about that really runs the mitochondria is copper. It's profoundly central to the function of those organelles.
That was awesome. What other foods outside of liver and bee pollen contain copper? It's whole food vitamin C. That's the only one I know of, right?
Whole food vitamin C. Then you've got things like asparagus, Brussels sprouts. Again, we're back to, does the farmer know that the soil needs to be fed? You know, most farmland, I think, is dirt. I'm not sure it's soil. You know the difference between soil and dirt. So we've got these classic vegetable sources. Nuts and seeds are all heavily composed with a lot of nutrients, but copper, especially in like cashews, pecans, walnuts, things like that. Peanuts. I mean, peanuts have been historically a very important source of copper, but what have they done? Now, farmers have a row of cotton, row of peanuts, row of cotton, row of peanuts. And what do they do with the cotton? They spray it with glyphosate. So then the peanuts get filled with glyphosate, and then people get peanut allergies. Why? Because the glyphosate is robbing copper out of their tissue, and they can't metabolize the protein in the nut. I mean, it's just, we could go on for days talking about stuff like that. So the tragedy is there have been historically rich sources of copper. A real quick way to think it through is, if you know what seeds have been made into GMO seeds, historically those foods were rich in copper. Corn, alfalfa, oats. You getting the drift?
Wow.
Where they've made conscious decisions to change the seed. Again, there is an agenda here.
That's interesting. Wow. Yeah, I got this really good fermented alfalfa that I'm giving the goats. That
I bet they love that.
I'm thinking of actually spraying it with shilajit. My friend recommended that. Just getting the shilajit, put it in a spray bottle, and spray their alfalfa with it.
Or do it just for fun. How many goats do you have?
Just 2 for now, but yeah.
Okay. Well, do the shilajit on one and deny it on the other, just to see if there's a difference. That'd be kind of cool.
That'd be interesting. Yeah.
I'm not sure it'd make it into a scientific journal, but it would be fascinating to learn about the difference. Yeah, that's very
That'd
cool.
be interesting.
Yeah.
The last question on copper, I think, is copper toxicity common? And I know you've talked about this in our previous episodes. They're a little quick. I know it's a long answer.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the importance of the question.
Yeah.
The social meme is that we are anemic and copper toxic. And the truth, as you and I have discussed, is just the opposite. We are, because the phrase that I use consistently is, we need bioavailable copper. And if the copper is not complex properly with its proteins, especially with ceruloplasmin, then it becomes biounavailable. Well, that biounavailable copper is the same as being copper deficient. And when it comes out of that protein, or any of those proteins, its unbound state rises. And that's what people react to. But then we have to remember that for every atom of copper, there's 60 atoms of iron. So let's pretend that copper is the Navy SEAL, surrounded by 60 ninja warriors. And we all love the Navy SEALs. They're very cool, but they're not going to win that fight. And why the spotlight goes on the Navy SEAL and ignores the 60 ninja warriors is a matter of fascination for me, because there's a default, blame the copper for the problem, and let's shield the iron that's really stirring the pot of oxidative stress. So I don't think that copper toxicity as a state really exists. I think we have unbound copper, and I think what's really stirring the pot is iron toxicity, because as soon as copper becomes unbound, it becomes unavailable, becomes deficient, and iron rises. And all the problems are this rising iron, but copper invariably gets blamed for it. How's that for a 2-minute answer?
Very succinct and awesome. That was great.
And I think people need to really challenge this mindset that we're copper toxic and iron deficient, because when you really study the minerals, you find out it's just the opposite.
That was awesome. And kind of just quite an offshoot question that came up for me. I don't know if I've asked you this in previous talks, but have you looked into the relationship with choline in the liver? Because I found a study, choline's role in maintaining liver function, and it talks about how low choline diets with rodents, they develop fatty liver,
Hmm.
and also get fibrosis and different things. And
Absolutely.
cerebral plasmin's made by the liver, right, largely, but
Absolutely. And so I think Chris Masterjohn has written about that pretty extensively.
mhm.
Choline is a B vitamin. I think it's like, what is it, B7 or it's
It's
the
B9 or
biotin,
something. Yeah.
choline, and inositol. They're kind of like the numbering drives me crazy sometimes. But so choline clearly has a relationship with copper. And when you get into the research, what you find out with um, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, that there are several factors in play. Invariably, you're going to have low choline, low copper, low retinol, and high iron. And
Oh,
those four factors play a very powerful role in creating the breakdown of the liver cells called hepatocytes. And they're communicating with what are called Kupfer cells. Those are named after Dr. von Kupfer in Germany in the late 1800s. And guess what they have inside them? What's the German word Kupfer mean? It means copper.
copper.
Yeah. And so um, if you don't have copper and you don't have choline and you don't have retinol, you will get non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And a very dear friend of mine who's a world-renowned uh, chemist, uh, when he came to America many years ago, uh, he didn't know not to drink Coca-Cola. He didn't know what high fructose corn syrup was. And he was in his 30s. Um, he was drinking one or two Cokes a day. And suddenly, in his early 30s, he came over when he was 21, and in his early 30s, he developed non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now, what people need to know is that high fructose corn syrup blocks copper absorption in the uptake doorway. It's called CTR1. And so if you don't know that high fructose corn syrup is a bozo no-no, you're going to create a copper crisis in your body. What it also does is when you lose copper, it affects the cells of the pancreas. They're called acinar cells. And the acinar cells are very energy dependent. If they don't have energy, they can't make enzymes. And so then what happened was this individual developed diabetes, type 2 diabetes, because of the lack of copper. So it's a known fact that choline deficiency is a big problem in the standard American diet. Choline, I think, is very prevalent in eggs, and there are many other foods that have it. But even as a precaution, people might even consider taking a choline supplement because it's dirt cheap, and it's just an important factor to make sure that there's a proper balance, a mineral balance in the liver.
I love it. Yeah, I avoid high fructose corn syrup like the plague, and that's why
Yeah.
we bring our own ketchup with us if we're going out for
Hmm.
some food. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll use that as a CTRF1. I'll use that line if someone asks me why I'm not eating their ketchup.
That's good. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Can't afford it, right? Oh my God.
uh, so someone asked about skin issues. Is
Yeah.
that a magnesium deficiency or a sulfur deficiency or related to those?
Well, again, it could affect multiple minerals, as you know.
Mhm.
But what's the largest organ inside the body? It's the liver. What's the largest organ on the outside of the body? Skin. And when the inside organ can't clear something, it pushes it to the outside organ. So things like psoriasis and eczema and rashes and things like that are usually a breakdown of the liver's ability to clear some toxin. Um, Again, what we have to keep in mind is that under those circumstances, oxidative stress is building, So then magnesium is going to get affected by that. Again, the magnesium loss is a reaction to a conflict between copper and iron and oxygen. And so people got to keep thinking about this focal point around the oxygen molecule. Is it getting managed properly? Is sulfur a factor? Of course it is, because the sulfur molecule can be very much instrumental in relating to the oxygen molecule. And so ideally what the body loves is sulfate. Well, there's a process to get to sulfate, and the liver's got to be clear in order to do that. Now, what they'll tell you is that the enzyme that does that is sulfate oxidase, and that is, I think it's manganese dependent. I was like, every other oxidase I know of requires copper, and there are 3 or 4 where they've identified other agents, and for the life of me, I can't understand how they did that. But we got to be careful about too much sulfur, because then it will affect the availability of the copper. And in the farming world, what you want to read up on, there's a fascinating article in the Canadian Journal of Veterinary Medicine. That one I'm going to have to send you. Matt, it's going to blow your mind. But what they talk about in that article is thiomolybdates. And in ruminant animals, sheep, goats, and cows, you've got to be really careful that they don't get exposed to thiomolybdates. Well, what is thio? Thio is sulfur. Molybdenum is the molybdate. And if sulfur connects with the molybdenum, it blocks the absorption of copper. And then we have a copper deficiency problem in these ruminant animals. So they're called TMs. There's TM1, TM2, TM3, and TM4. Well, what is TM4? It's tetrathiomolybdate, and that's what's used in cancer treatment.
Oh.
And why do they use that in cancer treatment? Because we're back to particle and field, and they're attacking the particle cancer because they don't understand that the cancer is an expression of failed energy production. And so instead of feeding the cells the copper that they need, they are robbing the copper and claiming that, well, the cancer rate or the proliferation rate goes down when that happens. So it's like, don't they understand how the cell is trying to look for oxygen and is using that copper to try to, it's like, they just don't see it. They're so lost in their particle that they lose sight of the real purpose of copper is to help the tissue get access to oxygen and to work with that oxygen.
Wow. I found a Ohio State University article. Molybdenum reduces the availability of copper in the rumen by forming copper molybdenum sulfur compounds called TMs, like you said. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that's a really big issue in the world of ruminant farming. You've got to be, because the sulfur and the molybdenum is typically in the soil. So you have to be very careful about supporting the animal's need for copper. Again, we're back to Andre Voisin, right? Soil, grass, cancer. And
interesting. Yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to educating the farmers, right, and the homesteaders, and the people doing this. Yeah.
Exactly. And I tend to simplify the message because I really think there's a hierarchy. Yeah, of course, there's 92 minerals on the planet that we know of. There's 18 that are considered essential. Well, there are only 3 that we really focus on in the root cause protocol, because if you can lower the iron footprint and you can raise magnesium and copper, man, there's a power shift, an energy shift that takes place once you do that. And again, the metabolic pathways all run on that energy. So try to keep it focused as much as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think if you have down the foundation, like I really love Shilajit. It's why I sell little tablets of it, because, really rare minerals like indium, which have an effect on glucose metabolism, that's kind of like college level which most people don't need indium. They need magnesium and copper first. So it's like levels of minerals, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. So I think we got to build the foundation. And I think a lot of people, especially younger people, they don't realize that they're the fourth or fifth generation in their family that may have been compromised because of what their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents might have, the food choices that they might have made. Because we grew up in a very different world and didn't know that this was happening. We weren't apprised to it.
Yeah, definitely. My kids will definitely not have fast food. We'll make them food at home that tastes better. So.
Well, every now and then you're going to have to take them to something. They're going to divorce you if you don't take them to Mickey D's once in a while.
or a healthier version. Yeah, there's like
yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly. I'm not pushing Mickey D's, but
it's probably the small, like the high fructose corn syrup. Because I mean, I just look at something like McDonald's. It's like an average, like a Happy Meal. I remember I would love my fries and ketchup, and I would eat probably tablespoons of ketchup with every one that I had, and that's a lot of HFCS, right, and inhibiting copper absorption.
Absolutely. I mean, and again, who knew? We just didn't know what the trade-off was. So. We're learning slow by slow.
We are, yeah. Someone asked why you recommend taurine supplementation, and you probably don't recommend that blanket for everyone, right? It's context, but...
Well, the thing is, it's part of the protocol, and taurine is a source of sulfur. And what I encourage people to do is, again, everything is about going low and slow and easing into it. I'm not talking about thousands of milligrams a day. I encourage people maybe to take a few hundred milligrams. I think the lowest you probably can get is like 500 milligrams. But there are people that have sulfur sensitivities, so they have to really monitor how they respond, and they'll know if they react to it. They're going to get pains in their liver. Their digestive system's not going to work right, and what that does is begins to expose where the imbalance is that needs to be cleared, and where the iron is really blocking the pathway. So the real priority focus, of course, is around the key minerals around magnesium and copper, and really lowering the iron footprint. But yeah, taurine is a part of the protocol, just as iodine is, but it's not in headlines like some of the other minerals that we focus on.
Awesome. Let's see. This is an interesting one. What is the best way for darker skin tones to absorb ultraviolet rays for vitamin D conversion? I'd imagine just get more sun longer, right? Be out there longer, but
right. And again, there's a reason why they have that melanin. There's a genetic component to it, but it's also that they are going to be more compromised to make vitamin D, but they also need to understand that vitamin D has a relationship with vitamin A. And what they really want to be focusing on is that people should be more worried about their vitamin A status than their vitamin D status. And there's a lot of confusion around that. There's a wonderful article by Mawson, Mawson, I think it's 2012. And it's a wonderful study that compares vitamin A and vitamin D in influenza. It's an amazing article. I mean, it's robust. There's nothing light about it. But what it does is it pulls the veneer off of, vitamin D does everything. And it doesn't. And what people need to understand about vitamin D is that the immune molecule of vitamin D is the active molecule. It's not the storage. So people are building up this storage thinking that they're protecting themselves, and no one tests their active status. And you don't want too much active. Trust me, it works against you. And so there's just a lot of confusion. And if people are at all interested, I would encourage them to go over to Jim Stevenson Jr.'s Seco-steroid vitamin D, Seco-steroid hormone D group on Facebook. That is the mecca for scientific information about why it's dangerous to just focus on vitamin D. There is a downside.
That's good to know. Yeah, I heard about the vitamin D craze with this whole coronavirus thing, and I, just because I'm here in Idaho, away from the equator, I just use my Spurti vitamin D lamp for 2 minutes front, 2 minutes back, once a day, and that's I'm getting my ultraviolet to make my hormone D in my skin, and to me that's just the balance, right? And I get my vitamin A from, and I eat a lot of butter, put butter on my steak, and I eat liver. And
but here's the kick. Again, it was in that Mawson article that I learned this. This is very, very important for people to know. What does sunlight do for vitamin D? It activates the synthesis of vitamin D. Really cool, right? What does sunlight do for vitamin A? It starts the breakdown of vitamin A, retinol, into what are called retinoids. What are retinoids? Well, they are retinoic acids. There's a whole bunch of them. Those are hormones. Thank you very much. Then there's a whole 3 different families of nuclear receptors that need to be made. Then we have all sorts of other cofactors that need to be broken down in the body, and it all starts with sunlight. And what I would propose is that the sunlight is way more important for breaking down vitamin A than it is for synthesizing vitamin D. Vitamin D has been put in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons, because what does vitamin D do? If you just focus on vitamin D, what you're going to do is you're going to block the absorption of retinol, and then what does that do? Then that starts. Go back to that chart from Hibbard. Oh, well, then our bacteria is going to change. Oh, we're going to be more prone to atherosclerosis. Oh, we're not going to be able to load the copper in order to have bioavailable copper. And there's a whole cascade of pathways that are solely dependent on having access to retinol and the metabolites that are released as it breaks down in the body. And where's that breakdown occurring? In our liver. Guess what? Those pathways don't work as well when you have dark circles under your eyes, right? It's all connected.
Interesting. I'll have to look into the retinoids. I haven't really. I know those are used for isn't there a skin, like an acne cream that uses a vitamin A, a synthetic vitamin A? But imagine for for the skin issues, like the question before, it's like UV to break down the retinol. That would be good.
And if you don't have the retinol in your diet, you're going to be more susceptible to skin issues. Again, and what are the skin issues? They are oxidative stress that's building in the liver. It can't get resolved, so it gets sent out to the skin. It's like trying to get your attention. Are you paying attention? Okay, what's that rash about? What's that? What's that eczema about? It's a response to oxidative stress that's building in the liver.
Interesting.
And so anyone who's had Accutane, don't if you can, I would advise people to avoid it at all cost. It's a very toxic form of vitamin A. It's a very bad, synthetic, destructive form, because what it does is it uses up the copper in that pathway that's supposed to be making ceruloplasmin. It makes it at a rate that it just uses up the copper, and then you are left copper deficient. It's a very dangerous thing to do.
Interesting. Yeah, when I got into health, I was doing a lot of green vegetable juicing. That's like slamming celery and carrot and juice and stuff. And my skin got initially better, but then when I started eating animal foods like grass-fed ruminant animals and raw dairy, that's when I actually got the glow, and my skin went to a whole nother level. So I think that was cool. The protein and fat-soluble vitamins and all that, the B vitamins.
Exactly. Yeah. No, the skin is fascinating. And for people who are interested in it, there's a company up in Seattle called ReverseSkinAging.com. And Lauren Pickard is the scientist who founded it. And it's all based on copper and retinol creams and potions. And it's amazing what he's put together.
That's funny, actually. I just looked at it, and that was one of the questions someone asked about peptide GHK copper to support bioavailable copper in the body. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, and Lauren Pickard is the guy who discovered GHK peptide. It exists in our body, and it can only be taken sublingually or transdermally. We can't take it through our gut because the peptide will break down, and it's a very, very effective form of copper that we're experimenting with. How can we incorporate it into the protocol?
That's interesting. Huh. Yeah, because I know we've spoken before about supplementing minerals, and you can play with fire, right, versus getting it from food, like if the form is incorrect.
Right, exactly. No, and copper is the most delicate and the most volatile. It's not easily accessed via supplements. And there's a lot of confusion around that.
Wow. Well, if this works, maybe I'll rub it on the goats.
Yeah, they might actually enjoy it. You'd be surprised. I think, again, goats are very copper dependent. They're really their physiology needs copper, so you want to be mindful of that.
Yeah, and because I sell a vitamin E supplement, like all the tocopherols, I know that goats are one of the few animals, I think maybe the only animal, that make their own vitamin E. They can synthesize it.
Now, I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So that means they must need selenium as well, because that's at the center of vitamin E. That's pretty cool.
Yep. Yeah. What's the best mineral to detox nanoparticulates? A lot of people are obsessed with like TRS and all these cleanses now, and I always tell people Shilajit, fulvic acid's better, but
well, I think you're right, and what I would do is tell people to support their liver by, I mean, again, I'm going to be shamelessly promoting the root cause protocol because it's based on Mother Nature, and again, the liver needs copper. The liver doesn't need iron. I mean, I know iron is there, but it's a copper organ. And when the liver has metabolic balance, is able to produce energy, there's 500 enzyme pathways that it knows how to run. Now, what happens is smart people think, well, I know how to outthink my liver. No, you don't. You really don't. Just focus on eating real food, get the right nutrients, the ancestral diet, and deal with your stress, get good sleep, and then let your liver get out of the way of your liver because it knows exactly what to do. I think it's also important to make sure there's big gaps of time in between meals. The liver likes 7 to 8 hours in between meals, and it knows what to do when it's not being constantly assaulted with some nutrient that it has to deal with. So people just need to be really aware of the amazing intelligence of that organ. It's an incredibly important part of our anatomy, as you well know.
I love it. And a question that just came up for me in my mind, I've interviewed my friend Josh Rubin on here a few times, and he's talked a lot about the kind of triangle between adrenal, and then liver, and then the thyroid. And he talks about how the liver loses its ability to store glycogen because of the adrenals being not functioning properly. Do you talk to the root cause protocol clients about the adrenals and how to? It's like vitamin C. There's a relationship there with the adrenals and vitamin C, right?
Absolutely. So we have what's called the adrenal cocktail. That's one key component of the protocol. But it's also that the adrenals are really dependent on minerals in general, but especially sodium and magnesium. And they love copper in the form of vitamin C, real vitamin C, very, very important. 95% of the body's stores of vitamin C are in the adrenal gland.
Oh.
What does the adrenal gland also love? It loves retinol. Tom Cowan down in San Francisco calls adrenal fatigue fat deficiency syndrome. So if you don't have fat in your diet, especially retinol, you're going to have problems. And then there's one more nutrient that adrenals really love. It's called vitamin Z. It's the nutrient that most people hate to imbibe in, and it's called sleep. You want to strengthen your adrenals, get more sleep. You want to strengthen your adrenals, spend less time in front of your monitors and your devices. You want to really strengthen your adrenals, try to minimize your exposure to blue light, and make sure you turn them off before, like 2 hours before you plan to go to bed. Again, one of the things that people find on the protocol is how quickly they get their energy back. Well, again, there is better communication between the adrenals and the thyroid and the liver. I totally get that. But we don't micromanage those organs. We're providing the nutrient base, the foundation that you just referred to, because they all need energy. They all need mitochondria humming. And it's just back to basics. Got to have the minerals, got to have a particular focus on the fat and the copper, and then just get out of the way. Let the body do what it knows how to do best. And so a lot of people try to micromanage the adrenals or micromanage the thyroid. It's like, I don't think it works that way. And we won't have a chance to go into it. I did a 3-hour discussion with a health coach over in Sweden. Her name is Anna Spar, Sparre, and she has a site called For Health. And we talked about just the thyroid gland. Now, people are at all interested in that. The 2 of the 3 parts, she broke it up into 3 1-hour segments. And the second part just got posted on the MAG Facebook group this past weekend, and the third will be coming up. But if you have an interest, maybe you and I can do a deep dive into the thyroid, because it is, I think, one of the most misunderstood aspects of our physiology. It is absolutely mistreated by a lot of folks on the planet, both the practitioners and the people. So.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested, and I'll check that out.
Yeah, I think you'll be fascinated. On a spar, you'll be fascinated by the discussion, because it's all about making energy, right? Mm-hmm. Well, thyroid does not make energy. That'll blow people's mind when they hear that.
Interesting. I know it's a thermostat, so it regulates the metabolism, and but yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Oh, I found it. Yeah, I could even put the link below to that one.
Okay.
Let's see. This is a good myth. Organ meat equal more toxins. So people think, and I get this a lot,
I'm sure,
even from people locally, when they hear I eat beef liver or bison liver, they say, doesn't that store toxins? That's like 90% of people's response.
It filters toxins. It stores it in fat, but it does not store toxins. I don't know I'd love to know where that lie started. Again, it's just more mythology. We've been misled and misfed. And keep it simple.
Yep, I love it. Ferritin, is there any logical sense in just reading that alone? I guess, can you get anything from just ferritin?
No, absolutely not. It's. I have renamed ferritin erritin. It's the source of all errors in iron supplementation. And I think we've done an entire session that talked about that. People, there's 3 different ways you measure iron in the human body. Hemoglobin, that's where 70% of the iron is. Serum iron, that's about 4%. And less than 10% is in the protein called ferritin that is found inside the cell. It is not supposed to be in your blood. In the blood, you've got hemoglobin, that's 70% of your iron. Serum iron, it's about 4% of your iron. It's a very important part. It's not a big part, but it reveals the health of the recycling system in the body, the iron recycling system. And the third is about 10% is found in ferritin. That's a protein that's found inside your cells. It's not supposed to be in your blood. You don't want it in your blood. When it shows up in your blood, it means that the iron has already been discharged in some tissue, usually the liver, and the cells of that organ are secreting the protein, the empty protein, into your blood, and it's a classic inflammatory response. So no, ferritin is a very dangerous way. As a solo marker, it's not revealing about the true breadth and depth of the iron status in the body.
Awesome. And then last question here before we wrap it up. This is something I've been studying recently. Healthy teeth advice. Is silica the most important, silicum? Because I've been studying like K2 and that's relationship with dental, kind of Weston A. Price stuff. But what are your thoughts on healthy teeth?
Again, the bone and the teeth are connected. right? They're the same mechanisms. So that, again, diet's very important. And we want to be really sensitive to the minerals, especially. Again, you can't, you've got to keep iron at bay. A lot of people know about the oil pulling. Well, it's a great way to keep iron. Again, using different oils. You can use sesame oil or castor oil would be it would not taste good, but it's a really effective iron chelator. Again, what is it doing? That it's pulling the iron out, which is also going to pull the pathogens out, which are usually at the root of the very problem. And again, the teeth are also connected to meridians. You're probably familiar with the work with Hal Huggins around that. And so if you've got a particular tooth that's sensitive, you want to trace that meridian back to find out what organ is getting wonky. Again, back to the diet, back to the stressors. I don't advocate this vigorous regimen of oral health, and I think I really do ascribe to what Hal Huggins said. 80% of the problems that people have physically started with a dental chair. That's usually where the problems start. If some dental procedure that was it really necessary? I think it's an arguable point. So I think people need to be very sensitive to that. I would, again, avoid the sugars, because what is sugar going to do? It's going to attract iron, which is going to attract the pathogens. And again, so I take a slightly different approach to oral health. And again, the diet is very, very important. And I think people just need to be very low tech about what they do for their teeth.
Yeah, I love it.
I think that's very important.
I look at it as more of like an inside out kind of job with the teeth. And yeah, that was an awesome answer. Awesome, Morley. Well, really appreciate you taking the time to come on here and share the latest. And you always have the best studies. Every study you send me, I'm just like, wow, how do you find this? It's great.
Well, they're finding me, Matt. It's amazing. And just in the last probably 3 weeks, I've found some of the most amazing studies. And I'm humbled and honored to have this continual magnet for these amazing scientific studies. So from time to time, we'll have a chance to chat about that. And I really appreciate your taking the time to hear me out. Let me dance on lines. I always appreciate the chance to do that. And we'll just keep the dialogue going.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, thanks so much, Morley, and stay on the show as I close it out. Thanks for coming on.
Okay.
Well, I hope this interview turned a lot of your ideas that you had about the immune system on their head, and it helped you to understand what really runs our immune system and what runs the mitochondria more foundationally, which is retinol, animal source, true vitamin A that doesn't need to be converted like beta carotene, and bioavailable copper. I don't think it's completely necessary to know what the mitochondrial calcium uniporter, the MCU, is, although it can help if someone's dealing with iron overload, which is pretty much everybody. Thanks to acid rain liberating iron in excess amounts from the earth, the soil cycles being completely destroyed or altered and not being able to uptake minerals in their organic form and just sucking up all of these inorganic minerals in NPK fertilizer. Then you compound that with acid rain and iron fortified foods, and it's a pretty logical conclusion that everyone on planet Earth has iron poisoning. And in previous episodes, Morley talked about how iron is an oxygen sink and all of the issues that iron causes in the body. If you enjoyed this one and you haven't heard the previous episodes with Morley, I definitely recommend going back and listening to all of them. There's so many gold nuggets in them that you can probably practically apply to improve your life. So I like that he said that oxygen's a bad guy. It's a free radical. We can't live without it, but we can't age without oxidants. Very true. And how do we use oxygen? No one ever goes to that next step, which is just fascinating to me. That shows, I think, the level of calcification, lipofuscin, and fibrosis that's just blinding us to just seeing the very next logical step, which is actually utilizing the oxygen. It's not just getting the oxygen in, it's utilizing it. And I plan to have some more episodes about oxygen and carbon dioxide in the future, especially CO2. I feel like that's underappreciated, overlooked. And from my understanding, my research, CO2 is the gatekeeper for oxygen. So without CO2, which is carb dependent, carbohydrate, sugar dependent, we can't get oxygen into the cell. And of course, you need multiple things, right? You need copper and the absence of iron in large amounts and all of these things, right? So it's a very big puzzle. It's a big picture. But I just see people focusing on the wrong things, like heavy metal and 5G, and none of that stuff matters if you're copper deficient or magnesium deficient or iron toxic, which is 99% of people on the globe, on planet Earth, have those three things going on. So it really makes sense to focus on these deficiencies. I also think that vitamin E and K2, especially in the MK7 form, but MK4 in animal foods is awesome as well. Just has different functions. But that MK7 form, what that does in the mitochondria is just incredible. And remember what Morley said about the rate limiting step in the mitochondria, complex 4? Guess what? K2, MK7 actually protects from complex 4 inhibition in multiple ways. That's incredible. It also acts as an electron acceptor and donor and protects from mitochondrial dysfunction overall. And it even supplies cofactors to complex 3 to function. So at different steps in the mitochondria, just having K2 really helps. And that's taking enough to get it past the liver. This fat-soluble vitamin, like vitamin E, that is often overlooked. Everyone's about A and D. And I like Morley's approach that hormone D, especially when you supplement it, can cause so many problems. Vitamin A as well. Just get them from food. Get them from light. It's so much safer. And you should be eating animal foods anyway. Because where are you getting your retinol? And I like the studies that he linked. I'll post those below, especially that graph that he talked about. I had no idea that retinol palmitate in these different forms of preforms of vitamin A can actually feed pathogens. That blew my mind. I had no idea. And I'm definitely going to use that line the next time that I have my own ketchup with me and someone asks, hey, why don't you eat the ketchup here? I'll say, high fructose corn syrup blocks copper absorption in CTRF1. Look it up and blow their mind. So I think this information has to get out there, at least to the people that are interested in taking their power back and taking their health back. So that's really what it's about. Because we have all the tools and we have all the information. In fact, there's so much information out there that you have to choose, right? What podcast you decide to listen to on a regular basis. What YouTube channels do you choose to subscribe to and watch on a regular basis? What educators you choose to listen to. And I try to have guests on here that really connect the dots in interesting ways that I'm not seeing in the alternative health community, that's just myopic, hyper-focused on certain things. And I also like to push the envelope with people's belief systems about human physiology, right? And how it works. So I'm a decade into study and experimentation on my own body. I've done all the diets. I've done all of the fads. I've taken most of the supplements, a lot of which I speak out about now, like omega-3 DHA, which basically my whole brand is an education campaign about how omega-3s harm you. And I get the question a lot from people to ask Morley about cod liver oil. Why does he still recommend cod liver oil? And it's like they're instigating a debate or trying to get him to stop recommending it. Look, I'm not going to agree with 100% of everything my guests have to say on this podcast, and that's a beautiful thing. Especially when Morley is a mentor of mine, because I know that people get this mentor complex where anything they say is true. And to me, that should only be the case with the Lord Jesus Christ, not with health educators, right? Or more dangerous spiritual, quote unquote, educators on this earth, which are largely just deceivers, which are talked about in the Holy Scriptures, these seducers. So I like that I don't agree with Morley on everything. I think that's great. And it's completely okay. And just because he has certain things in his protocol that I don't agree with, it doesn't mean throw out all of it. Because for the most part, I agree with what he recommends. And him and I are also on the same page. Getting it from food is always better, from a food source. And so I like that we delve deep into the soil and ruminant animals and talked about goats, because I really think that there's something really special about raw milk in this specific time in human history. Like, I've read some great books like The Wildlife of Our Bodies. There's a chapter in there dedicated to the history of milk and how that whole thing started with humans milking ruminant animals and how that supported their health. And we're in a completely different context now where it's more life and death than I believe it even was back then. It might be slower, but there's certain nutrients in raw dairy and raw milk that we can't get anywhere else. If you wanted to just talk about ionized calcium in dairy, which you can look up on PubMed, that's a very, very special form of calcium. And people will recommend green leafy vegetables for calcium and coral calcium and all these different sources, pearl. I believe that calcium from dairy is the safest and the most natural to get in large quantities. And it's absolutely required, just like magnesium, right? It's a balance. And people can be deficient, and they are deficient in the right form of calcium because they're getting all of these inorganic forms of calcium because they're dumping inorganic calcium hydroxide on the soil, and the plants can't absorb it and transform it into organic, carbon-based, carbon-bonded, plant-based mineral. So we're getting rocks, whether it's in the spring water that's calcium or the well water that's calcium and iron, or the produce, which we were raised on, or if we went vegan or vegetarian, which we ate a lot of. All those salads you ate, it's still stuck in the tissues. And that's where my message lies, is with the accumulations of calcification, lipofuscin, and fibrosis. And I think it is foundational, and it is a no-brainer that everyone's full of this stuff. Because you look back at what you were doing before, and you shake your head, right? You say, oh, I've changed. Well, your body hasn't changed, because all those decisions you made in high school and junior high, in your 20s, all those decisions still impacted your body, and that mark is still there. And the mark might be the omega-3 barcode, as Adam Bergstrom calls it. It might be the lipofuscin. It might be the calcium deposits in your soft tissues, making you stiff, not able to bend, not flexible, in pain, chronic back pain especially. Might have fibrosis, probably do, especially in the liver. And as Morley talked about, the liver is so important for so many things, but it makes the ceruloplasmin protein, which makes copper bioavailable. So just having these accumulations, let alone the vitamin A deficiency and the vitamin E deficiency and the choline deficiency and the animal protein deficiency and the carbohydrate glycogen deficiency and the liver, stack all of that. And remember, the liver has 500 functions plus. Now, how is it supposed to perform all of those functions if it has all these accumulations that aren't allowing the cells to make energy, and there's deficiencies stacked on top of that? It's just the odds are stacked against our livers. And so we really have to, that's a focus, in my opinion, instead of focusing on, all these little things that people get into, like heavy metal detox and just all these rabbit holes, mold, and just focus on strengthening the system. Then you don't have to worry about all this pollution that you're going to be exposed to, whether you like it or not. Your body can handle it. I really like what Morley said about the energetic field being strong and how that links into our immune system. If you have a strong bioenergetic field because your cells are generating energy, remember 9,000 revolutions per minute at complex 4, then you have, I look at it as an electromagnetic field, and that is information that constantly feeds your system on how to perform as it should optimally. So it really comes down to mitochondrial health, to supporting energy production. And you need certain things to do that are widely deficient today, namely copper. If you hear someone talking about the immune system, even the alternative health community, there's a very, 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 very slim chance you're going to hear them say the word copper, let alone ceruloplasmin. That's why I love Morley, because he's getting to the root, like his root cause protocol. And I'll put the link below to where you can check that out. He just started doing some webinars, I believe, and just continues to share really awesome information. And as promised, I'll link the studies below as well. So check the show notes to access all that good stuff. And as always, my two websites, matt-blackburn.com and mitolife.co. That's how you can support me and the show. And I love doing this, even though it's crazy and there's spiritual battles going on all the time, especially within the actual health community, with different factions that have different intentions with people. What keeps me going is the community of you guys that listen to the show and support me through buying my products and going down the mineral rabbit hole and just getting this information out there about omega-3s in supplemental form, especially being not the best thing for human health and perhaps even causing disease. So I've been really busy here on the homestead working with a few goats and chickens and bees and geese. So I've had my hands full, and it's actually helped me to really focus on things that matter. We can definitely get caught up being too much indoors, looking at screens too much, even just researching too much. And I'm going to start researching how to increase the bioavailable copper in my raw goat's milk that I drink every single day. Because to me, that really matters. And it's better than any form I could possibly get in a supplement. And probably even in a food shipped to my house because it's not fresh. There's something special about just milking the goat and drinking it that has a profound effect on the body. I've been feeling very strong drinking that milk. And there's so many components to it. The macrophages, but I believe that the copper is a big one. And it takes a long time to get the iron levels down. A long time, because every time you donate blood, as Morley talks about, or get an iron panel, there's blood loss and most of the iron stored there, and then it pulls it from deeper in the body. But depending on how much you have stored deep in the body, you might have to pull it multiple times at the same time being on a bioavailable copper diet and doing all of the right things at the same time. So it's a protocol. If you're a little overwhelmed, go back and listen to the other Morley episodes that I did with him and all my other podcasts as well, ones that you're gravitated towards. I really think that enzymes, minerals, fat-soluble vitamins, animal protein, carbohydrates, these are overlooked aspects of health that are foundational. And lastly, I have an exciting announcement. I just released a new product under my brand Mitolife. It's called Dairy Absorb. I received a lot of messages from people for months and months and months. Matt, what if I get bloated or gassy or acne or inflamed or I get rashes drinking raw dairy? What do I do? And my response was always start slow, back off, drink small amounts, take my digestidol supplement. But the digestidol helps with protein breakdown into amino acids because it has protease. And it's a little pricier. It's about $20 more than the Dairy Absorb, which is good for people that just want the dairy assimilation. And so it's actually a concentrate of the lactase enzyme, which allows us to break down and assimilate lactose, which is the disaccharide sugar present in milk and cheese. And lactose is actually comprised of glucose and galactose, those types of sugar. And remember that glucose runs every cell in the body. It's the primary fuel of the body. But a lot of people have problems splitting the lactose into glucose and galactose. That's where the lactase enzyme supplementation can come in. And again, at the same time, it doesn't hurt to go slow because what that does is that upregulates your endogenous production inside your body of lactase. But if you want to jumpstart, if you want to help your system out, then you could actually supplement lactase in a pill form, which I do. And I actually use it if I'm eating a big bowl of ice cream. And that's kind of like a little hack to be able to digest, a lot of ice cream if you're into that sort of thing. Grass-fed, high quality, of course. I like the brand Double Rainbow from up in San Francisco, but there's many other good brands out there. I would say just find a small brand. Try to stay away from the bigger brands. My nightcap at night is often a bowl of ice cream with the reishi syrup concentrate from Shen Blossom. And it's called Presence. And I'll just put a little teaspoon on the ice cream, and it's fermented barley syrup with reishi spores in it, and the whole component of the reishi mushroom actually, and it makes me feel really good. And I'll take 2 to 4 lactase enzymes with it. And if you're just having a small amount of dairy, then just 1 to 2 is fine, but definitely experiment with the dose that works for you. And I've just had a lot of benefit personally from the lactase enzyme, so I figured I would offer it under my brand Mitolife and see if it helps people out, because dairy is worth consuming. High quality dairy is worth consuming. Raw cheese, raw milk. These have so many nutrients in it. And if you can access them, especially just the sugars in it, then that will help to support every function of your body. Today's quote is by Andre Voisin. The mineral element does not exercise the same influence when it is applied to the soil as it does when added to the ration. The trace element of the soil is organized by the plant. The mineral elements of soil are transformed by plants into organic compound, which have a dietetic value, very different for the same element under its mineral form.